The Minister of Tourism, Patricia de Lille, there facing a barrage of questions from members of Parliament following, of course, that decision which she defended last week and is doing so again in front of Parliament today to say she did the right thing. The law actually allows her to do what she did. But of course, most in fact, of those members of Parliament are having none of it. Governance expert Dr. Harlan Cloete joins us now for some analysis on the Portfolio Committee on Tourism grilling Minister Patricia de Lille. A very good afternoon to you, Dr. Cloete. Thanks very much for your time. Just what you made of what you've been able to see this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Vuyo, and good afternoon to the viewers. You know, it certainly makes for interesting listening and interesting viewing because it also shows, you know, our democracy is alive and well and functioning. Parliament have in the past been accused of being too soft on ministers, but it is very good to see the healthy, robust debates around this issue.
Except, of course, it's not that consistent because, certain ministers get treated one way and others completely differently. But let's take the positives. I mean, for now, the fact that she's being forced to answer the questions, but she maintains that only the courts will actually give clarity on this because she thinks she's on solid legal ground. But there's something I picked up because she was asked earlier about how this move has actually affected the plans, the South African tourism plans. And then she quoted the Tourism Business Council that she says wrote to her and actually said they effectively supported her, and she maintains that there is no impact whatsoever. In fact, those were her actual words. But then last week, the South African Tourism Business Council was on this program and several others where they disagreed with her move. They didn't feel or think that she ought to have done what she did, but of course accepting that she maintains she's on solid ground, so there's nothing that they can do. But they didn't like the decision at all. But interestingly, how she put it was as though they actually supported. She made it appear as though they actually supported her, which is simply not true.
So somebody's lying, and again, that will come out. I think that there is, if she, like she did, she fired the one board and replaced it with another, it does bring about instability because any board in any new organization, you take about 3 to 6 months to find your feet, to find out what is the nuances, what is happening in the organization, where it should be going. We have seen in the past where there is tension between a minister and a board and the CEO in that mix. It does create tension, you know. It does create instability. We've seen that at Eskom, for example. So it is important that there is a golden thread between the minister, the board, and the CEO to make sure that there is good governance in the organization. If there is tension, like we've seen, you have instability, which does not hold good for the industry.
Well, it's going to be interesting where all of this is going to end. But of course, I mean, there is the other matter that we are dealing with these days as well. Social Development Department suspending its spokesperson Lumka Oliphant pending an investigation into alleged misconduct following audit findings flagged by the Auditor General. Now, in an interview with us last night, Oliphant claimed that she was targeted after the Sunday Times exposed Minister Sisi Dolashe's alleged 3 million rand trip to New York. She alleges that the department's Director General accused her of leaking the information to the media. A suspension letter also cites the alleged mismanagement of a 6 million rands government program. Of course, this is still a developing story. Everyone is having their say. I don't know what you made of it following, of course, that Sunday article and what she has subsequently said, Lumka Oliphant, that is, in her own defense.
I said on Sunday in that article, I said, I don't mind people attending conferences as academics. We also attend conferences. You share knowledge. I think if ordinary South Africans look at this, they look at the spending, they see, but is this really necessary? You know, are we getting value for money? And is it money well spent? There are questions around the delegation, etc. Now, the suspension of Ms. Oliphant for leaking, that is not the issue. That's a sideshow, I think. The real issue is the openness and the transparency and whether the department can account for its expenditure on this conference. What has been the return on investment, I think, is what taxpayers are asking.
See, because, I mean, this issue comes, I mean, not too long ago, you had the Minister of Justice having to defend herself, facing similar accusations as to whether, the trip was worth all the money that was spent on it. Perhaps, doesn't this call for a relook of all these matters? Because it often depends on who the accused is at the time. And in certain instances, which takes me back to what I was saying right at the beginning after your first answer, that often it depends on who is the person who stands accused of spending or wasting taxpayers' money. Because if, for example, you belong to, let's say, the ANC, your own comrades within the portfolio committee would tend to defend you. In the instance of Ms. Patricia de Lille, where neither the ANC nor the DA is going to rise to her defense, and so did, of course, other political parties as well, then she's left to fry.
But that's what, and I think she also said that there's the rule of law. You can't defend the indefensible, you know. If you are wrong, you are wrong. And if whatever legal action, administrative action that is taken in this country, it can be reviewed. So if the minister was wrong, you know, in terms of even if I suspend a person or if I simply fire a person, that person is still protected by the rule, by the law. And so the rule of law is still supreme in this country.
Yes.
People can go soft, for example, in Parliament, but that is subject to review. So the previous board, for example, can take Ms. de Lille to the court and have her decision reviewed. The same in Ms. Oliphant. If she has been wrongfully suspended, then the law is on her side. She can. It's sometimes very expensive, and it's sometimes very long process. But I still have confidence in the law and in the system.
Yeah, but often it gets to be expensive and it takes time, and and people usually have families to leave. I know this because I was once involved in something similar. But taking in both instances, if you take, for example, what the minister says or has put before Parliament, saying that the board has actually ignored successive Auditor General warnings, saying they have failed to fill critical posts, saying they have undermined a proper governance procedure. Again, similar accusations are being leveled at the Ms. Oliphant says, well, you should be looking at the Director General, and how such things would have happened under their watch.
It's exactly that. It sometimes boggles the mind how people treat other people, or how people even treat organizations as if it is their own. They run an organization, they think their organization, sometimes they run it like a spaza shop. And so leadership is important. The Auditor General year after year talks about ethical and accountable leadership. I think that is not too much to ask. I think that is what we want. People want to be treated fairly. People, if you look at the dream of 1994, it's about people's dignity and how we treat one another. And so sometimes in organizations, you have bad leaders who really treat people like dirt in organizations, and that is not what we want. That's not the culture that we want to install in organizations. So when people are treated unfairly, when leaders act unethically, it does raise alarm bells. And luckily, we have got a very vigilant media like yourselves to call people to account, because it is all part of administrative action.
But then, I often wonder, whenever we get Auditor General reports, I'm scathing about municipalities, government departments, and the like, we'll criticize, we point, we talk about the wrongs that the Auditor General would have raised that often don't get corrected, and we move on. And then the following year, a similar report or an even worse report appears. We do the same, rituals, but consistently, in fact, more often than not, these get ignored and nothing happens. No consequences for people.
No, exactly. We've beefed up the Auditor General's office in terms of the material irregularities. But it would appear that, especially municipalities, people, they hear, but they're not listening. They are simply not taking. And so a big thing in public governance is this thing called consequence management. The will to be able to deal with the wrongdoing, the will to turn it around. And sometimes there's a lack of political will to call people to book and to say, listen, this is what you have done wrong. We are now going to act against you. In many organizations, some people get away with murder, and then some people are dealt with very severely. And so it is those type of governance issues, the leadership issues, the human resource issues within organizations that in many cases is the downfall. There's a cliche that says, people make or break organizations. And so that is what we need to deal with, the leadership within our organizations. I think that's where the problem lies.
Dr. Cloete, let's leave it there for now. Thank you very much for your time and insights. More news after this short break. Don't go away.